What's going on, boxing fans? Julian Williams with The Distance. I'm here to give you my number 3 of my top 5 Manny Pacquiao fights for this week. My number 5 was Manny Pacquiao versus Lionel Ladapa. My number 4 is Manny Pacquiao versus Ricky Hatton. And on my number 3. My number 3 is Manny Pacquiao versus Marco Antonio Barrera. Now, Marco Antonio Barrera is looked at as a legend in the sport of boxing, especially to the Mexican culture of boxing. And there was a lot of mystique and prestige brought to him after the matchup with Eric Morales. Eric Morales versus Marco Antonio Barrera was a war. All three matchups. Um, they're very entertaining to watch. I still watch those matchups all the time to this day. And Marco Antonio Barrera was the man at 126 at the time. He was considered the lineal champion. So Manny Pacquiao, after his matchup to Ladapa, he's having a successful reign at 122 pounds, and now he's moving up to bigger and better things. And this is Marco Antonio Barrera, and this is the best fight that he could have at this moment. It's funny because at the time Marco Antonio Barrera was considered the man at 126, but he didn't. I believe he didn't have a belt at that time. I don't think he had a belt. But he was still considered the top guy at 126. So Pacquiao faced the top guy, which is the best fight that he could have. Barrera, he could fight, anyone else. I think at the time he could have fought Juan Manuel Marquez. I believe he was holding 2 belts at that time. Or he could have fought like Eric Morales again. He did fight Eric Morales again at that time. But he gave Manny Pacquiao a shot. And Manny Pacquiao took advantage of it. So in the first round, Pacquiao came out and he tripped, and the referee considered it a knockdown. And it wasn't a knockdown; it wasn't even by a punch. But Pacquiao went down, and I would have given the round 10-9, but everybody was giving it a 10-8. But I'm not gonna go with groupthink of tunnel vision and everybody just scoring the fight the same because somebody else scored it. Because you would have to score that. Probably a 10-9, because he didn't necessarily go down off of a punch, because I think he just tripped over his own feet, and he came back up and he was fighting. And then the second round came, and Pacquiao hit Barrera with this straight left hand that sent Barrera to the canvas. And I remember when I first watched the matchup years ago, I was about 15. I watched the matchup and I remember Barrera get knocked down. I couldn't believe it because at that time I never seen Barrera go down, and it just surprised me because Barrera's a warrior. He still is a warrior to this day, but Barrera, he went down off that straight left hand. And I remember just the look on his face and stuff, and how he got up, and I just couldn't believe it. And Pacquiao, was just beating on him using his hand speed and moving around. And at this time, this is a different Manny Pacquiao we saw, back in May against Ricky Hatton. This is a different Pacquiao. This Pacquiao had a lot of flaws, but he was able to get away with it because he had so much speed and he had so much power in those shots. And he's hitting Barrera with all these shots and knocked him down. And there's a few times Pacquiao would hit Barrera with flush shots, and they would hurt him. And then the 11th round came, and Pacquiao actually got the TKO against Marco Antonio Barrera. This is something Eric Morales wasn't able to do, or Junior Jones. At the time, I believe the 2 fighters that had beaten Barrera. And Junior Jones didn't really do much in his career. And that's not taking the victory away from Pacquiao or anybody. But I'm just saying Junior Jones didn't do much in his career, but he still beat Marco Antonio Barrera. And so did Eric Morales, and that matchup was a disputed decision. But the fact that Manny Pacquiao is the first fighter to knock out Marco Antonio Barrera, that's huge, actually. If you ask me, that's really big. And this is a prime Marco Antonio Barrera. Though he had been in wars, this is a prime Marco Antonio Barrera, so you have to make this your number 3 fight if you're going to analyze Manny Pacquiao fights. because this is a big accomplishment. He took out the top dog at 126 at the time, who was Marco Antonio Barrera, and knocked him out in the 11th round. So that's my number 3 matchup for this week. Be sure to tune in for my number 2 tomorrow. But anyway, that was the distance. Peace.